the US economy has suffered the sharpest drop since the financial crisis.
Week, 3.3 million Americans filed for unemployment.
On the growing economic woes facing our country.
The economy really is in crisis right now, and I don't believe this is going to change in 6 months or even a year. There might be some hope in the horizon, but that hope does not translate to economic success, at least in the near term. I believe that we should all be preparing ourselves for a COVID economy that sees a lot of suffering everywhere. A lot of business closures, a lot of business that might not ever come back. As freelancers, this is obviously bad news for us. However, I'm here to impart some advice that hopefully can help you navigate this economy and allow you to continue to work. So here are my 4 tips in order to navigate an economy in crisis as a freelance programmer. Let's get started. Welcome back. I hope that the intro didn't depress you too badly, but I believe that this is an important topic of discussion for freelance programmers in order to help them go through the new COVID economy, as it's probably not going to get that much better. But I do have some advice for you, 4 tips basically, and I hope that you can gain something from watching this video. So let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is market trends. Following and understanding how market trends are set in this new economy. So what does that mean? If you are able to know how a job or a business is going to do in the economy, then you probably would either apply to it if you think it's going to do well, or you're probably going to avoid it if you think it's not going to do well. We have seen that businesses that rely on physical contact with people usually don't do very well in this environment due to lockdowns, or because people don't want to be congregated as much as they used to be before the whole COVID situation came about. In the past, I have not done my research when I applied to companies. All I cared about was looking at, do I match the job description and how much they're paying? However, nowadays, I think that you have to take the time in order to understand where the revenue is coming from. So if the revenue is tied to something that requires that physical contact, or that can be disrupted down the line somewhere in the chain due to a lockdown or due to the actual epidemic itself, then maybe it's best to avoid that job. For example, restaurants, cinemas, amusement parks, they're not doing pretty well right now, but Amazon and pharmaceuticals are doing very well right now because we are moving towards a more remote and non-physical way of doing business. I believe that if you are trying to have the best chance of getting these new jobs, just do some research on whatever it is that you are applying to, and seeing whether or not they make their money, most of their money at least, from physical contact, or if they can make their money or have made the shift to being able to provide a business service or a product virtually. That's essentially what you need to do. Tip number 2. Tip number 2 is going to be choose your freelancing strategy early. Are you going to be someone who's going to work project by project, or are you going to be someone who's going to try to find something longer term, maybe a 6 month to 1 year contract? Now, they both have their pros and cons, and I'm not against either of them. However, I will admit that I'm personally someone who does the contract route. I take maybe 1 year contracts here and there, and that's how I usually do it. But if you're someone who does project by project, that's also a good plan. Now, there are pros and cons to them, like I mentioned before. The pros of working on project by project is that not all your eggs are going to be in one basket, but the cons are, if you take the economy into consideration, how likely are you to keep lining up projects over time? That is the ultimate problem. If you're able to do that, then you have a little bit of security in there, in the sense that even though one project might fail, another one is waiting for you. And you're constantly looking for more work, much more than someone who will be doing the contract route. On the other hand, if you're doing the contract route, you have a little bit more stability in the fact that you are going to work for one company for a longer period of time. Companies usually are very particular when it comes to software developers because they want to keep them for as long as possible. They're difficult to replace. They are also wary of the time it takes for someone to get initiated into a project that they were on and to learn the ropes. So they want to keep their software developers. However, if push comes to shove and they have to get rid of people, you may also be on the chopping block. So the ultimate con of doing that route is that you put all your eggs in one basket, in a sense. But if you continuously keep working and keep on interviewing, as you should be, then you can mitigate that and have, a little bit of a buffer between you getting fired if it's possible, and then having another job lined up for you. The good news is that if you are in the tech world, even in an economy like this, you have more of an advantage than other careers because it's much harder to replace you and find your skills. So you will be doing better than average in finding another job or another project, but you are still not immune to, economic crises like, anyone else could be. So my advice is to have your game plan ready to go before you set out to do it. So choose your freelance strategy early, and then you have to plan accordingly, which leads us to our next tip. Tip number 3, budget accordingly. I know this one is essentially something that everyone should be doing regardless whether or not you are a freelance programmer, but if you are going on a project-by-project basis or a longer-term contract, then you should know exactly what your expenses are and how much money you have saved in case something happens where you cannot supplement your income. Essentially, this is not a how-to budget video. This is just me saying that if you have not budgeted effectively, then you should start now and really look at your finances. If you ask yourself this question, if I didn't have any money coming in for 1 month, would I be okay? And your answer is no. Then you really need to look at your finances and see what you can do in order to supplement that income. If just for like a week or two, it doesn't matter. Just have something so that you can bounce into another project as quick as possible. It might not be likely that if you were in that case that you would be able to jump into a project in such a short amount of time, but it's better than nothing. You need to be prepared at least long enough for you to find another job. Even in the best of times, when I was unexpectedly laid off, it took me about 2 months to find another job. And that was in times before COVID. Nowadays, who knows how long that could take. So just make sure you take that into consideration when you do your budgeting. A typical good advice for budgeting is 10 to 15% of your income should be put away in order for a rainy day that could happen. And just ensure that you can at least last the next job. So simple advice, not just for freelance programmers, I get it, but it's very important now more than ever in order to take your finances into account and really take a hard look at your expenses and exactly where or how much money you need in order to survive an amount of time without a job. Tip number 4, invest in yourself. I know it's kind of counterintuitive from the last tip about budgeting, but investing in yourself is a good way of increasing your income and your marketability, especially in times of economic stress. So you want as much advantage as possible. The way you can invest in yourself, even if you're having money troubles, is by finding cheap courses and learning new skills through there. That's how I do it. Or finding free courses if you can. Some places that I would recommend are Udemy and Pluralsight. Udemy is a really good site because they offer you courses for a flat fee. So you can get them for $20 or less, depending on whether or not they have a sale. So I would recommend Udemy if you are seeking like maybe one skill, but you want one skill that's very, very in-depth. Just look at the reviews and make sure that the instructor is very active in the course that they produced. For Pluralsight, it's a little bit different. Pluralsight, I believe, has a subscription-based model, but you have access to all the courses. So if I were you, I would invest the money in them if you can. And it's well worth the investment getting new skills. I'll give you some examples of what you can invest in. So some skills that are going to be popular are the cloud technologies. Cloud technologies are what basically everyone is moving towards since they offer so much utility and they offer a good way of companies reducing their space and their infrastructure costs. So there's a lot of utility in them. The big three being AWS, Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. Amazon AWS is the biggest in market share when it comes to cloud technology. and Google and Microsoft are way behind. But they're all three, either one you choose is going to be very good to learn because they all have a market niche that they've set out already. So regardless which one you want to learn, you'll be fine. In fact, I would suggest AWS or Azure over Google Cloud because these two are usually the ones I've seen that are more used by bigger companies. And Google is used by smaller companies. I think they're gravitating more towards the machine learning side of Google, which is much better than the other two in my opinion. But regardless when you choose, it's a good investment. Some other programming language to learn are going to be open source technologies like MongoDB, Python, and Node.js. I always forget that one. Out of the three, Python is probably the best to learn because Python is so ubiquitous. It is used in cloud technologies, automation, and machine learning. And it's used in all three of those cloud technologies that I mentioned before. So if you can only choose one skill to learn next year, I would definitely choose Python. Now, when it comes to more obscure technologies that you probably haven't heard of, there's one technology I could probably recommend. I haven't used it myself, so I'll admit that here. But I am a Microsoft boy, and this is a Microsoft technology. The Microsoft technology I'm talking about is Blazor. Blazor is supposed to be a competitor to JavaScript and React. So it's supposed to be a front-end browser technology that you're supposed to run C# in your browser. And that could be something that takes off. Right now, I don't see too much of it going around, but it is building its community, it's building its base. And maybe in a year or two, it will be something that can compete against React or Angular or whatever. Reason being is because if you can have one language to go between the front end, the back end, and then you're probably using SQL for the back end, then you have all Microsoft technologies and you don't have to cross reference your skills as much. So that might be something that companies will gravitate towards, but right now it's in its infancy. But everything that's in its infancy, especially when it's backed up by a big company, could be worth looking into. Well, that's the end of tip number 4. And, I'll just give you a quick recap. These tips are useful even outside of an economic crisis or a pandemic. However, what these have in common is future-proofing you to a degree and helping you get rid of some of the uncertainty that's going to come from turbulent times, COVID, crises, all that stuff. And I hope that by giving you this plan of attack, it reduces the panic that you have as well, because panic and desperation are good ways of making bad decisions. So, just remember that. Hey, this video isn't as lighthearted as I'd like it to be, but I hope that you still got something out of it. The advice that I'm giving you is advice that I also follow myself, and I hope that it helps you as much as they've helped me. So, as always, please stay safe out there. Keep yourself safe, keep your family safe. And, if you liked the video, give me a like, subscribe, comment there, even if you didn't like it. Tell me how I can improve. It's a learning process for me, and thank you so much for watching the video. I'll see you next time. Contract Answer out.